So I've been getting a lot of comments from one of my more recent Minute Magic videos that look a little something like this. So why are the rules that way? Is it that the rules managers are incompetent? Is WOTC just lazy and don't want to fix it? Let's talk about it. So in that video, the ruling that it deals with is this one right here. But let me paint the scenario for you folks that haven't seen it yet. With my O'Hare Ashenil and City on Fire on the battlefield, I'll cast Shock targeting you. Alright, pause. In this scenario, who do you think is going to be the one that gets to apply the effects? That's right, the opponent. Wait, that's not what you're going to say? So in that video, I talk about how damage isn't defined as an object, and because it isn't an object or a player, it can't be the thing that's being affected. So what is the affected thing in this case? Now, I know some of you out there are going to say, well, obviously, the thing that's being affected here is the source of the damage. I mean, wouldn't that be the thing that makes the most sense? The effect is modifying how much damage the source is dealing, therefore affecting the source, right? Well, there's a few things to note before we make that assumption. Now, an important thing to note is that replacement effects modify events, and guess what damage is considered? That's right, damage is not an object, but an event. And the result of that modification to this event will determine what happens to the object, or in this case, the player. Another important thing to know is that what is being modified and what is being affected are not the same thing. So in this situation, the damage is what is being modified, but after the modifications, the player is what is being affected by it. Now follow me here. The result of modifying the event isn't going to affect the source at all. The damage might change, but the source is going to remain the same throughout the whole process. But the modifications will definitely affect the object or the player that's receiving the event. Okay, sure, Chuki, it makes sense with how the rules are written, but it still makes no sense that my opponents get to choose how to apply my effects. Why does WOTC hate us? It's not necessarily that the rules hate you, actually, it's the opposite. The rules are designed in a way to make the most amount of sense for the most amount of scenarios. So, when it's taken out of context like this, it makes it seem like it's nonsensical. But let's take a look at a different scenario. Let's say player 1 has Gisela Blade of Gold Knight on the field, and player 2 has O'Hare Ashenil and they deal 1 damage to player 1. How should these effects apply? Some of you might say use AppNap, but if we did this active player, non-active player order, then depending on whose turn it is, player 2 will deal either 0 damage or 2 damage. That's not very consistent with what either card wants to do, and involves a lot more tracking. And while in this scenario it's not too hard to keep track of, what if we add in 1 more player? What if we add in more replacement effects? It can quickly get out of hand, especially in a format like Commander where there's so much going on already. So what if we do something like timestamps? Well, timestamps fall under a similar issue of unnecessary tracking. If you have a few, it's easy to track, but if you have a bunch and certain ones leave the battlefield and enter the battlefield, then what's a new timestamp? It could be too much to track, and we already do that for layers, so I don't think we need to do that for replacement effects as well. It's much simpler to know how to apply things once we do it by affected object or the affected player. We can kind of guess how that player is going to affect it every time. But let's take a look at another scenario. I'm going to sacrifice my Blightsteel Colossus and shuffle it into my library. Actually, I'll exile your Blightsteel Colossus with my Dauthi Voidwalker with a Void counter on it. Hold on, I've got a Rest in Peace and I want it exiled without a Void counter. It's my Blightsteel that's being affected. I should be the one that gets to choose what to apply here. Well, my Voidwalker was the most recent thing to hit the battlefield. So what? I'm the active player. Mine should go first. Now, I think we can all agree that we want to avoid a scenario like this. And you know what? They could probably all argue their own points for why they should apply theirs first. But at the end of the day, we need one consistent way that we can apply to all these effects, and none of them are perfect. But if there's an option that's more intuitive for most situations, then the rules will favor that route. Notice that I said most situations and not all situations. With a game that's as big and vast as Magic the Gathering, with all the cards that they printed and are continually printing, you're bound to run into some weird interactions. It's kind of inevitable for the game. But because of how robust the rule system is, there's almost always an answer for everything. It's not always a good answer, but there almost always is an answer. Then some of you might be saying, why does a wizard just change the rules? It can't be that hard to fix. Why don't they make an errata? So I can't give you a solid answer for this since I don't work at Wizards, I don't know anyone on the rules team, and I don't know the whole process for making rules, but these are my thoughts on why Wizards doesn't do this. And I think most people don't realize how extensive the comprehensive rules is, how deep it is, and how much there is to read through it. So if you're going to add something to that without breaking other things about the game, it's pretty difficult to do. It's pretty delicate, the whole process that they've already laid out. I mean, sometimes we see this happen with new mechanics that come out, and they break old mechanics that they didn't really consider. So even Wizards gets it wrong sometimes. They're going to go through the entire rules and try to make this one thing work. Where's the line that they draw for other aspects of the game that are unintuitive? And I don't think that it's really that game breaking for this kind of thing. Sure, you might lose out on a couple points of damage, but like it doesn't make the game unplayable. And if it really is that much of an issue for players, you try to learn the rules a little bit on a more deeper level. It just makes you a better player in the end anyways. So that's just my thoughts on it, but people are free to disagree. But if you're still not satisfied, then what I say to you is Rule 0 is king. Nobody can hold you to the rules of Magic, and you're free to play however you want as long as you and your playgroup all agree. Because I believe that the point of playing Magic the Gathering isn't to win the game, but to enjoy the game. I think it's great that you can play at a highly competitive level, but also you can just bust it out like a board game with your friends for Commander Night. There's no wrong way to play this game and no wrong way to enjoy it, and you should be able to do what you want to do with the game. Magic is a spectrum, and there's enough space for all of us to enjoy on here.